The Doctor, Report 1. It isn't often that an agency agent goes rogue, not with all the countermeasures and preventative security that has been implemented. But sometimes people slip through the cracks. When they do so, it's usually an action with monstrous consequences for all concerned. In the case of the Doctor, he was a senior researcher who not only went insane, but he took his research with him. Dr. Harris Fimser, age 62. He was recruited into the agency right after completing his doctorate in his early 20s. His specialty was working with the genetics of viruses and bacteria. His doctoral thesis was based on his belief that viruses could be tailored to eliminate genetic defects, potentially curing serious disorders, cancers, or outbreaks of disease. He possessed genius-level intelligence, and as a researcher for the agency, his solutions have corrected or prevented many potentially catastrophic incidents of global significance. From countering the venom of conventionally unknown creatures to stopping the transformations of many humans into monstrous creatures. But that wasn't enough for him. He wanted to do more. He wanted to improve the human condition, so we weren't simply reacting whenever the next monster was discovered. He wanted to be proactive. That is the excuse Dr. Fimster gave himself anyway. But as he grew older and experienced countless fascinating cases in the course of his career, his desire grew. He really just wanted to experiment with all the new things that came into his lab. Not merely curing the latest venom, reverting the unwanted change, or figuring out the best way to kill a creature. No, Fimster wanted to take the knowledge that he'd accumulated over the years and he wanted to apply it. That yearning grew and grew until one day, something broke inside of him. He started to experiment, and the good doctor himself was his first test subject. This was counter to the agency's policies, of course. And no matter the position of the one breaking that rule, the person involved would have gotten into serious trouble. So how did the Doctor prevent himself from running afoul of the agency's two greatest protectors against internal corruption, the Judge and the Web Eater? It was surprisingly simple, given the Doctor's intelligence and motives. For the Judge to be alerted, there would need to have been a betrayal. All the way to his core, the Doctor believed that his motivations were just and in the best interests of the agency. And therefore, there was no betrayal. He genuinely believed that once they saw his improvements, the agency would want to implement them on a global scale. As for the Web Eater, one of the first upgrades the Doctor applied to himself was to take some of her flesh, willingly given for the purposes of experimentation, and create a virus that would make him exempt from her special brand of augury. These two things let him fly under the agency's radar for years, slowly adding to himself with each new project that arrived in his lab. The Doctor, while ostensibly human on the surface, was becoming less and less recognizable on the inside. Repeated gene grafts essentially reversed the age of his internals to that of a man in his 20s, one who had been in training for the Olympics. Along with reversing his biological age, the Doctor made himself immune to most venoms, as well as all of the agency's tranquilizers. Finally, almost ready to show his superiors the strength of his upgrades, the Doctor used the skin of a particularly tough creature as the basis of a retrovirus, one that mutated his body and gave him subdermal, bulletproof armor. The process also gave him above-human strength and endurance. Dr. Fimser felt proud of what he had achieved. He could really see the agency adopting his genetic mods and applying them to all of their field agents. It would dramatically reduce the number of casualties on assignment. So he took all of the notes and research he had prepared and scheduled a meeting with his fellow researchers and superiors. He was determined to show them the potential his experimentation offered. It did not go well. Everyone was horrified at the changes the Doctor had made in himself. He was confused as to why they were so disgusted and hostile. It's not as though he'd killed or hurt anybody else. They didn't understand though. Right away, even during the presentation, people were calling for him to be restrained, to take his notes and see if they could somehow reverse the changes the man had wrought in himself, to fix him. Hearing this, Dr. Fimser felt betrayed. All his years of loyal service, all the sleepless nights spent elbow deep in guts, the time he spent just holding his words in while he slaved away in preparation for this day. This was how they treated him? At the arrival of the agents who were called into the meeting room to take the sick doctor to a containment cell, something again broke inside the doctor's mind. He would just have to show them. That judgment was a grand mistake. They weren't ready for the doctor's normally pale skin to shift to a blackish grey. The 4 agents who were summoned to the conference room to arrest what they thought was an overstressed old man were also not ready for the beating that followed. That day, the doctor fought his way out of the agency base, taking advantage of the shock of the event to take his tools, research, and a few choice specimens. Then he made his way out, further injuring more agents and taking very little damage in return. First, the agents deployed tranquilizer darts, which failed to penetrate his armoured skin. Then, they tried gassing the rooms he was in, which failed due to his immunity to the chemical agents used. Next, they dropped the steel shutters, a measure used against escaped creatures. At this point, the doctor was strong enough to punch through the steel like it was paper. By the time the teams with heavier ordnance arrived, the doctor was long gone, having escaped the base and fled. His home was searched, but it was found to be empty, along with his banking accounts. After that, the doctor vanished. He wasn't seen on social media or any of the facial recognition programs constantly running worldwide. He was made a priority retrieval target for the agency. The urgency of his capture was not only due to the imposing physical changes, but after a long career with the agency, the doctor knows a lot of secrets. Add to this the discoveries he may have made, but has never shared. Combined with the field training all researchers go through upon admission and periodically refresh over time, his knowledge of agency procedure means that he can avoid us with ease. Worse, though he no longer has access to agency resources, Dr. Fimser did not cease experimenting. And he no longer restricts himself to merely experimenting upon himself. Some of his experiments have been encountered in the field, showing that the doctor is getting better and more creative in the implementation of his alterations. Every experiment able to be recovered has been placed into containment.